It's a beautiful place physically, it's a beautiful place culturally, and it's a beautiful place spiritually, and visitors can come and experience that firsthand. Well, the Rio Grande importance to the Native Americans, of course, is it's the source of water. It's the source of life for this desert region. People had a very, very tough time when it came to water. So this was always, you could always find water here. You could always find the plants that you needed for your various purposes growing here because of the good source of water. This is the lifeblood of New Mexico and remains so today in modern times. The Rio Grande is a major flyway for many, many different species, especially ducks and geese, which means that it's a favorite hunting grounds for the birds of prey. And of course, with the reintroduction of the river otter, we're always keeping our eye out for those little rascals. They're so much fun to see. They're so playful, and they like it here. And just like all species in New Mexico, pretty much everything almost was extirpated, at least decimated, by the late 1800s, early 1900s, because there was no concern for the wildlife. Everybody's here trying to survive, trying to make a buck, especially when the Americans came. That's when the real devastation of the area took place. The Native American Indians and the Spanish have a certain connection and respect to the land and the wildlife, maintaining balance. Respect and balance is how things are sustainable. But when the Americans got here, it was all about profit and racism, other less scrupulous motives. And so the hunting really devastated. The elk was wiped out, the bighorn sheep was wiped out, the otters are wiped out, and the beavers were all but wiped out. Extirpated is the word they use, which is, I guess, one step down from extinct. They still exist, but they were not in viable populations. The human beings have been around this area for tens of thousands of years. The more they study, the more they realize that the people have been here for a very, very long time. They utilized the river for a lot of the stuff that they needed to survive, and a lot of the stuff for their more spiritual religious aspects also. So the villages usually in Taos County especially were not down at the river because it's too rugged. They were up on the side creeks where it was more reasonable, but they would visit the river regularly. So you have the Pueblo culture that lives here and has been here forever, and then you have the Athapascan culture, which visited here regularly, the Utes, Comanche, and Apaches especially. And the idea of further protection of the Rio Grande was brought up, and so the idea of a conservation area, because we realize you have to respect traditional uses. Firewood gathering, hunting, grazing, even some low impact, small scale mining was appropriate in the monument as a conservation area. Didn't really go anywhere for a very, very long time, but it was always in the background. And then they made a big push because Senator Bingaman, who had introduced legislation regarding the same, was retiring. And they figured out, well, this is a perfect time to get this done, even though the present day Congress is very dysfunctional. It is common, it is customary when somebody of Bingaman's stature and longevity, 30 years, when he retires, they give him some piece of legislation that he is fond of. And he was very fond of the Rio Grande del Norte conservation area and the Columbine Honda Wilderness also. And so there was a renewed effort to get the legislation passed, but when it went before those yahoos that are there now, it totally stalled and it died. And so that's when they realized, well, wait a minute, national monument status doesn't need congressional approval, it just needs a president's signature. So that's when we started working on the Obama administration, and he was a little resistant at first, but then when all the facts came down, and it's a timing issue with Bingaman retiring, he had not signed very many protection bills, Obama hadn't, and this was a perfect opportunity for him. Because the fact of the matter is, the Rio Grande del Norte is in the middle of nowhere, and there's not a whole lot of human activity out there, so it wasn't impacting industry or municipalities or private land very much. So it was kind of a no-brainer, and he signed it on March 25th, and we're super, super happy that he did.